James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Welcome to a more civilized podcast. This is the podcast you're looking for. You may not go about your business. Stay here, listen, and then move along.
Oh my goodness. Here we are again, listeners. Welcome to another episode of a more civilized podcast. I'm Kyler.
I'm Chris.
I'm Ross.
Yep, sure are. This episode is going to be mostly Chris talking, so Ross and I are going to do a little bit of it right now.
So if you've disliked these episodes in the past, buckle up.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, Ross, I think you have some news for us.
I have some newsy news. Yes, I do. So first is a very sad...
I feel like these news items are going to be so good and important to you, Ross, that you're going to want to talk about them next week.
I know, right?
I just have this premonition.
It's just... Yep. As if I leave it in that edit. So, I mean, remember, ultimate power.
Yeah, Ross has unlimited power.
Unlimited power. Dang it, ultimate.
You do that all the time.
I'm terrible. Anyway,
just adequate. Ross, you're not terrible.
I'm just adequate. So first, we have a very sad bit of news. EA is at it again.
Gosh, EA.
So,
I think they have a board of directors that they brainstorm the worst possible idea and then they go with that.
They have a board of directors that sees, the top 5% of money-making games and are just like, hey, let's just make one of those. And those tend to be Candy Crush, Clash of Clans, things like that. Call of Duty.
Medal of Duty Honor.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So
Call of Honor, Medal Duty.
I don't remember if this was announced before or after the game episode that I did.
I think it'd be hard to pass a game called Medal Duty.
But
that would probably be about how good it is.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Good on you, EA.
EA has canceled the open world Star Wars game being created by Visceral Games.
Why?
Well, they say why in their little press release, because they want
It's a dumb reason.
They want to refocus on... I don't remember the words they said. They wanted to focus more on money-making type games. It sounds like it'll probably be something mobile, and it'll probably be something dumb.
Mobile games are the worst.
So they're moving away from the open-world Star Wars game to make something. It is still in the Star Wars universe, but they didn't really give any details on what it is.
I hope when EA's contract is up with Disney, that Disney takes it away from them. Because this is now the second time that they have had a really killer game.
Yep.
Mostly, if not entirely, ready to go, and then they're like, well, peace out.
From what I understand, it was still a ways out.
Yeah, but 1313,
yeah,
the old Battlefront 3, I know that wasn't necessarily EA's thing, but it's just like every time there's an actual cool Star Wars game that Star Wars fans are excited about, EA's like, oh, let me drop trow and take a big old deuce on this before we chuck it away.
Yeah.
Ugh. I hate you, EA.
So,
I hate you. I hope you're listening.
The thing that worries me is that it's going to be the Disney business people talking to the EA business people, and that'll all sound great to all of them.
Yeah, to them, and it will sound great to none of the fans.
Yeah. So, that's the sad news. But now we can get on to the happier news.
I just want to say I hate EA one more time. Just EA, I hate you.
Yeah. On January 28th, Anthony Daniels sent out an interesting tweet saying that day was his last filming as C-3PO.
Yep.
On episode 9. So,
yeah,
I also just saw one in my newsfeed as we're sitting here that said that was a similar thing from the BB-8 Puppeteer.
Oh, really?
Wrapping up his...
and I've been seeing that as well, just from a lot of different people that kind of one by one, everybody's chiming in. Yep, I'm done. My stuff's done. My stuff's done. Like,
I remember there was another one a few days ago that I saw. I don't remember who it was now, but BB-8, that surprises me. That means they must be getting real close to being finished.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of good, though, that they're wrapping up this early. Like, end of January, beginning of February, and it's not coming out until December, because that gives them plenty of time for reshoots that don't have to be rushed if they need it. It gives them a lot of time to edit it, make it tight, clean it up, make it look good, and the story flow good and all that kind of stuff.
And this is where a lot of the visual effects will be happening.
Yeah.
They will have started on stuff as soon as they had it in filming. But, I think that's pretty standard to be...
Well, but the other ones have been more rushed than this.
Well, the standalones have.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying is I'm kind of glad to see them saying, okay, it's the end of January, we're just about done here.
Yeah.
And that gives us almost an entire year to polish it and shine it up and make it look pretty and good and make the story good. Which is currently my biggest worry.
And, and that's probably why we're not getting a trailer at the Super Bowl, is because they are just finishing up, and so they don't have anything even to cut together, probably.
Well, you think about the
not
first,
enough to make a trailer.
You think about the first Force Awakens teaser trailer. It was 3 shots. You had Luke putting his hand on R2. You had stormtroopers turning around at the speech.
Finn popping out from below frame.
Yeah, and that was it. And basically that was it.
You had Kylo's lightsaber, because that one got a lot of laughs.
Yeah. Well,
which is funny, because at this point I like it.
But yeah.
I was laughing when we watched episode 1, and my son saw Darth Maul's lightsaber and was just like, "Oh my gosh!" And he's like, "And the next one's gonna have 3." And I was like, probably not. But he's like, "What are you talking about?" Like, I have it on my sleeping bag. I have it. It's my toothbrush. And I was like, "Oh, Kylo Ren's." I guess it does have 3. I didn't think of that as 3 blades. I thought of it as a blade and 2 guards. But yep, you're right. Next one has 3, and then the next one after that I'll have 4.
I love it.
Wasn't there a 4, a cross lightsaber that someone had in the old EU?
Probably.
I mean, it looked like they were running around with a big tire iron.
That sounds like something that they do in the old EU. Yeah.
Yeah. But, so I don't know. I mean, they could potentially... I don't think... Well, and I don't think that they will, because that's what I've heard online, is that Disney's basically like, don't hold your breath for a Super Bowl ad, because we're not making one.
Or maybe they're just going to surprise us.
Could be, but I think they would want to
drum up
interest rather than try to stifle it and then take everybody by surprise. Because let's be real, the nerds aren't going to tune into the Super Bowl without some sort of incentive.
That is
true.
Most of us, that is true, yes.
So, boy, Super Bowl. Which will have already happened by the time this airs.
Yeah, so we may be completely wrong at that point.
Yeah, who knows? We'll, I don't know.
I'm ready to get the hype train started for episode 9.
I am too. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. If they don't do it at the Super Bowl, I could see them doing it at Star Wars Celebration in April.
And that's what a lot of people.
And that's my prediction, is that no Super Bowl, Star Wars Celebration, and then we'll start to see it hit more heavily on TV and stuff.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see it at the end of April on Avengers, on Endgame.
And it could be there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. But either way, I think we're still a few
That would
months out. Yeah. So I'm not...
Well, usually the trailer premieres aren't on the movie. Usually at least recently, they've been releasing them to the internet first, and then they pop up on those. So I would...
Well, but even so, then I could see them releasing it on the internet.
Release it on the internet.
And the Wednesday before Avengers comes out, and then it's go to Avengers and rewatch the trailer.
Because it's
on the big screen.
Even people who aren't looking for it on the internet are going to see it at Avengers. So there's no better way to guarantee a large audience of people seeing this trailer.
But then again, they didn't do that really with Last Jedi. They didn't really advertise much anyway on their own.
That's fair.
Their own movies, like people thought. So who knows? Fair. Nobody knows what Disney's doing, is what we're saying.
Hopefully Disney knows what.
Hopefully Disney knows.
Do we remember how early was it that trailers started appearing for Last Jedi? Force Awakens was a solid year.
Like a year. Last Jedi was 4 months or something like that before.
I feel like it had to have been longer than that.
It was more than that. Because I remember it being around my birthday or something.
6 months would make sense then, if that was around your birthday then, Chris.
Yeah. But
But I still feel like that's a little bit short.
And then Solo was 2 months before.
Yeah.
Almost
nothing.
Yeah, that was weird.
2 months before, and even that was pretty sparse.
Yeah. I don't even remember a Solo trailer. I mean, I remember
the one, but they only did the one trailer for it. Whereas Last Jedi and Force Awakens both had 3 teaser trailers and then 2 or 3 full, 2.5 minute
international
trailers.
Yeah.
So who knows? Who knows anything?
Let's see.
But either way, that's kind of exciting, though. I mean...
Hey, okay, so this Last Jedi official teaser trailer on the official Star Wars channel was published on April 14th.
Oh.
2017.
April. Sounds like 8 months before.
So that's more than I thought, yeah.
Wow.
That feels, I mean, obviously it is.
So that would
lend credence to, the Star Wars Celebration. It's mid-April. It's April 18th or something like that. This year is the first, something like that. Mid to late April in Chicago. I wish we could go. I almost got tickets, but there weren't 4-day tickets left. And so I was like, well, if I'm going to go, I'm going to go for all 4 days. And so then I didn't. But maybe next year. Because I would love to go to Star Wars Celebration. Like, Gen Con is super fun. I'm not knocking it. I have a good time every year, but dang, Star Wars Celebration.
Which, I mean,
would die.
Some of us are going to have to do as soon as we're
Some
able.
point,
And
yeah.
as frequently as possible because of this podcast now. So, I mean,
Hey, yeah. That's true.
hooray for making the things you want to do things you're supposed to do.
Yay! Oh, man. Well, I think that's
That's
it
the
for
news.
Yeah.
All right. So,
Chris, according to
let
my
it be
notes, you
written.
need to take it away.
Yes. Away
is-
it shall be taken.
This is where Kyler and I sit back and get comfortable.
Pretty much.
Yes,
We're about to get learned.
Yeah, I'm excited.
in publishing, which I am. Yeah, it's
All right,
gonna be
yeah.
fun.
So we're gonna talk about Star Wars publishing. This is books and comic books. We're gonna talk,
Oh, I'm so excited.
and actually, we're even gonna branch a little further past some of those. So,
Wait, how do you branch past books and comic books?
you get into newspapers, newspaper comics. Actually,
What?
there was a Star Wars
Really?
newspaper comic. It turns out, for several years.
Actually, now that you mention it, I think I might actually have known that piece of trivia. But it was just so buried.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, after Ross did our awesome LucasArts episode, we were talking about publishing, and I
Which
went,
is
you
a
know,
really fun episode. You
Yeah,
should go listen to it.
definitely.
Like, really good episode.
really you should listen to all our episodes, listeners. But
Yeah.
but
No, Chris, they only get one. And they've started this one, so it's too late.
Oh yeah, that's too
Yeah.
late. This is it.
There was one.
Oh man, there's so much
Make
pressure.
it a good one,
There's
yeah.
so much pressure now. Please stay. Please keep listening to us. Stay a while and listen.
Yeah. High five. Good game.
Not a Star Wars reference, but we can't always. We're only adequate. So
That's right.
okay. So history of Star Wars publishing begins in 1976.
Wait,
Really?
Yes, it does.
Wait,
That's
hold
right.
on.
You heard correctly.
Chris, 1976. So, for our maybe less informed listeners, that is 1 year before Star Wars comes out. in
Technically
theaters.
6 months. Yes,
6 months. Okay.
6 months before Star Wars came out in May, and the novelization of the original Star Wars movie, which was titled Star Wars: From the Adventures of Luke
Oh
Skywalker,
boy.
was first published on November 12th, 1976.
Oh my goodness. Wait,
Fun
so
little
they
fact.
novelized episode 4 and then showed it in theaters.
Yeah, which was not uncommon. Even
That's interesting.
even today with the prequels and with the sequels movies, the novelizations generally come out first to try and drum up interest.
Right.
That is interesting.
Yeah, that is. But I had not realized. Yeah, that they
Wow.
did that with the very first one. So that was a common Hollywood.
Yeah, because I
practice.
know they've gone, like,
Yeah.
I know that there are novelizations now, but I assumed it was always like an after-the-fact thing. I didn't
Yeah.
know that this was like a plan from the beginning.
Yeah, it's a common Hollywood practice. So they went and it was George Lucas's personal agent, I believe, contacted Alan Dean Foster. Well, they contacted Ballantine Books, and they went through and they found Alan Dean Foster, who is a pretty well-known science fiction writer, and put him in contact with George. He went to the LucasArts headquarters, which at the time was just a little warehouse in California, and met up with George, and they hit it off. And George liked him, and so they said, "Yeah, we're going to do this. We want to extend a contract to you to do 2 books that based off of this movie." And Alan Dean Foster was up for that, so he ghost wrote the novel. It was credited to George Lucas as the author, but George has actually been, generally from what I've read and what I've seen, he's been very open about, no, I didn't actually write that. Like, it's my story, but Alan Dean Foster wrote that. He credited him in the acknowledgments for later editions of the books, everything after that first edition, and Alan Dean Foster, for his part, people have asked him, like, well, did you feel snubbed when you didn't get credit? And he's like, no, I knew I was ghostwriting from the start. It was his story. I was just
Putting
fleshing it
words,
out, yeah. And so they seem to get along pretty well. So he wrote Star Wars: From the Adventures of Luke Skywalker, and it was published by Ballantine Books, the Del Rey division of Ballantine Books, which Ballantine Books itself was owned by Random House, as a large chunk of the publishing industry is and was. So that released on November 12th, 1976. By February 1977, 3 months later, 3 months before the film was released, the novelization had sold out its initial print run
Oh my
of
oh my
125,000 copies.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah, which in those days that was a decent print run.
Yeah.
These days that is unheard of. Like, that is an
Yeah.
obscene amount of books, because the publishing industry doesn't sell quite like it used to.
Yeah.
Generally speaking,
Yeah,
you got
your
your free
ebooks and the
Hunger
internet
Games
and everything. Yeah.
What is a good run? It's kind of like Nielsen ratings on TV. What is a good run these days would not have been a good run back then. But even so, 125,000 was not something to shake a fist at back then. and it sold out in 3 months. So they did a second print run even before the movie had ever released. So Star Wars was massively popular even before
Star Wars.
Before Star Wars came out, yeah.
Ooh, so Star Wars was hipster. It was cool before it was itself.
Yeah.
So, well, I wonder
Within
if this
3
is-
months of the release of the movie, Ballantine had sold 3.5 million copies of this book.
Wait, say that one more time?
Within 3 months of the release, so 3 months after the May, June, July, August, by August 1977, Ballantine had sold 3.5 million copies of this book.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty widely successful.
Holy cow.
Right? Yeah.
Wow. That
So what were
is
you
so
saying,
many
Ross?
books.
Well, so I have two thoughts. First of all, is maybe, I mean, perhaps that's part of the reason why Star Wars itself was so successful is because all the people that picked up that book
Yeah.
wanted to go see the movie. The other part is George Lucas a little bit clairvoyant? Because, so, he had apparently an amazing start to a publishing empire. Just off of this, I'm going to say it's a great start. They had lots of great, awesome books later. He knew to keep the merchandising rights and not sign them away like
He
most
was
other people
very
did.
business savvy, yeah.
And immediately started with a computer gaming type division, which also eventually became super successful.
I'm not saying George Lucas is a time traveler.
But like, yeah,
I'm just saying it
how
would
can he
explain a lot.
hit that many different mediums?
Well, and see, the thing with print is that was just pretty standard Hollywood practice. I don't think he was looking at that as a big moneymaker. It was just sort of it's another thing we can do to potentially make some money that everybody does. We're going to hire a ghostwriter on the cheap, and we're going to try and get someone, a talented one, so not too cheap, but still. And he had done, Alan Dean Foster had done novelizations of movies before, and so he was a really good, solid choice. And then it just did well, which impresses me too, because, a large part of what made Star Wars such a big deal was the special effects.
Right.
But this book, it did not
Yeah.
have those. And it still sold out in 3 months. And I don't know what its sell rate was between. I couldn't find anything between that February and May release, but it clearly was doing pretty well.
How were books advertised back then? Like, how did people find out about this?
You would have, from what I know, you would have had a lot of it would have been just through bookstores, through displays, through getting, even nowadays, a lot of getting your book to sell is just getting the booksellers themselves, the bookstores and such, excited about your book, and then they'll advertise it for you. They'll put it out front. They'll make a big deal out of it. There would have been announcements in magazines and publishing magazines and stuff. Maybe a bit of ads run, but probably not generally.
Right.
Mostly, book sales have largely always been word of mouth.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the big way that it sells, and so that's particularly impressive there.
Yeah.
It's like there's something about Star Wars that really strikes a chord with people. It's more than just those special effects, and apparently always has been.
Well, it's a good story. I mean,
Yeah.
it's as we talked about in our early episode. What is it, like episode 5 or something like that? The Lucas's influences on Star Wars. That it's, and our classifying Star Wars episode. That it's got a lot of those classic elements that just resonate with people on a primal level. And so if you've got that kind of a story, it's no wonder it's going to be popular in any way that you tell the story.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the very first Star Wars anything. 6 months before the movie came out was that book. Then in 1977, 1 month before the movie came out, in April 12th, 1977, we get the Star Wars comic book series published by Marvel Comics. Yes. So how that came about is a similar thing, where this wasn't as common as a film novelization, but they knew that there was likely to be some significant overlap between comic book fans and the fans of this movie. Right. And so it was Lucasfilm's publicity supervisor, Charles Lippincott, approached publisher Stan Lee in 1975, over a year before the movie came out, about publishing a Star Wars comic book to hopefully appeal to the most likely primary audience. Stan Lee initially declined to consider such a proposal. He was not interested in space opera and outer space comics and the like, and was only persuaded otherwise in a second meeting because a different editor at Marvel, Roy Thomas, was a huge fan of space opera. He wasn't interested in space opera at the time. You got to remember that Star Wars is the one that revitalized that.
Right.
So,
Right.
Well, and I find that funny because, like, a lot of Marvel comics now
Yeah.
take place in outer space.
very much, but
So,
but
Guardians of the Galaxy
Yeah.
and all that.
well, on half of X-Men and
Yeah.
all sorts of things.
But the next year, Roy Thomas was a big fan of space opera comics like Planet Comics, and he wanted to edit this series, so he arranged a second meeting to try and convince Stan Lee that this is something we should do. And Stan Lee greenlighted the project once he heard that Alec Guinness was involved.
Really?
Yeah. And so he decided that if Alec Guinness was involved with this, that it was probably going to be decent enough to at least move some issues. But he... since movie tie-in comics rarely sold well at that time, Stan Lee negotiated pretty tough on this, a publishing arrangement which gave no royalties to Lucasfilm until the sales exceeded 100,000 copies.
Dang.
Wow.
And then at that point, legal arrangements could be revisited, which worked out really well for Marvel for those first 100,000 comics.
Yep.
But then at that point, they had to revisit the deal from a position of significantly less strength.
Yeah. Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Not just that though, but this was a period in time where comics were struggling. In the mid to late 70s, there was a lot of difficulty as a lot of the kind of mom and pop stores and roadside stores stands that would sell these were closing down. They weren't doing too well. A lot of bookstores weren't picking them up. And so, the direct market concept that they eventually settled on to be able to market to comic books had not really been established. And so a lot of comic book companies were having a lot of trouble at this point. And Marvel editor-in-chief Jim Shooter says that the strong sales of Star Wars comics saved Marvel from financial collapse
Wow.
Dang.
in 1977 and 1978.
You hear that, Marvel movie fans? You wouldn't be here if it weren't for Star Wars.
Yes, sir. Yet another franchise that would not be around if it weren't for Star
Dang.
Wars.
That is so incredible for just cultural influence.
Right?
Yeah.
Because Star Wars tips over the Marvel domino. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That is so impressive. George Lucas, dude, man of the century.
Starting on April 12th, 1977, they started releasing Star Wars comic books, which began with a comic book version of the movie, and before moving into original tales further on. And that ran from April 1977 to May 27th, 1986.
That's not a bad run.
Not bad at all. And then, in addition to that, they also published original Star Wars comics in the Marvel magazine Pizzazz between 1977 and 1979.
That just sounds fancy.
Right? They were the first original Star Wars stories not directly adapted from the films to appear in print form, as they preceded those of the official Star Wars comic series and the sequel book that came up. A lot of those comics were later reprinted by Dark Horse Comics, etc., etc. Okay, so that's 1977. Movie comes out. Those comics become a big deal. The book does fantabulously well. 1978, we get Star Wars Splinter of the Mind's Eye.
I've read this.
You've read
I've
it. You've
heard of
actually
that.
read it. Yeah.
I think I have a copy here, actually.
Wow, that's
Wow.
impressive. That's
I
some
have
hardcore.
not read it. I have
Yeah.
heard of it, though.
Yeah. So this was the second novel in Alan Dean Foster's agreement with LucasArts, or Lucasfilm at the time. Yeah,
Lucasfilm,
Lucasfilm. As a sequel to the film Star Wars. It was published in 1978 by Del Rey again. It was written with the intention...
Del Rey publishes most of the Star Wars books.
They do right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and they did then. But the book was written with the intention of being adapted as a low-budget sequel to Star Wars in the event that the original film was not successful enough to spawn the franchise that Lucas was hoping that it would. And so he was just hedging his bets. He's like, give us a low-budget...
That Lucas was, quote-unquote, hoping it would, quote, because he's obviously a time traveler who knew what this was going to be.
Well, I mean, he was hedging his bets here. So,
Yeah.
in fact, he gave Alan Dean Foster pretty free reign of what to do. He basically just said, I want a sequel that is going to be easy to produce, low budget. And so Alan Dean Foster wrote it, and George came back and said, okay, this scene, I want this simplified in this way. I need you to cut this and move it to this sort of setting so that this, and basically everything that would be significantly easier for them to be able to film if they didn't have a budget. It did not feature Han Solo, focused on Luke and Leia, because Harrison Ford's contract did not originally include 2 movies, and they were not certain they would be able to afford him for a second movie if they didn't have a better budget. And so he was not in that book, though he was referenced by Luke as a smuggler friend that he knew.
There's convenience.
Yeah. But then, of course, the movie did do well, and so although they already had this agreement in place, so they published the book, but by then they had already scrapped the plan to actually follow the book.
Yeah.
And went in their own direction. Also in 1978, Pendulum Press, under their educational series Contemporary Motivators, published a 31-page loose adaptation of Star Wars by Linda A. Cadrin and Charles Nicholas. It was produced as part of a package which included an audio tape and a film strip. The comic was specifically designed for classroom use, with typeset instead of hand lettering and vocabulary appropriate for children.
Well, there we go.
So that was the third series of Star Wars comics that we got. 1979, we got Han Solo at Star's End on the publishing end, and Han Solo's Revenge, the first two of the Han Solo Adventures trilogy. Written by Brian Daley. Basically intended to cash in on these. These came out 6 months apart, which, I don't want to be too biased, but speaking as someone who writes and stuff, that rate of publishing is often a good indication that they're not necessarily going to be the best quality. There are exceptions. I do love Louis L'Amour. But and Brandon Sanderson can really turn him out, but even he doesn't usually make that consistent of 6 month periods. So.
Yeah.
But so these were this was a trilogy of books, the Han Solo Adventures, focused on Han Solo. Like a lot of the early tie-in materials, it focused more on the fantasy side of the sci-fantasy. Where you get a lot more of the fantastical little stranger plots instead of the Star Wars usually tries to walk this line of, yes, we're being fantastical and we're not really paying that much attention to the science, but we still want to feel like science fiction and not fantasy, despite the fact that we've basically got space wizards jumping around with light swords. And so
that's awesome.
And that's I often find that that's where a lot of the stuff that's not as well received goes, is it tends to step into territory where it's like, that's just a little weirder.
Yeah.
It's a little too much,
And that, honestly, when you say that, those were some of my least favorite episodes of like Clone Wars or Rebels, were the episodes where they strayed a little more into the fantasy rather than the sci-fi. And I'm like, okay, I can see where you're going with this. Not my favorite though, so that's very true. They need to stay in that middle ground.
So those were our two books, and then we also got comics. A newspaper strip was published beginning in 1979 and lasted until 1984. Distributed by Los Angeles Times Syndicate and the Watertown Daily Times. It had a revolving creative team that based the storyline and characters on the original trilogy, but didn't directly adapt any of the stories, and just sort of fleshed out the history between the three films. So, interesting approach. 1980, we got the novelization of The Empire Strikes Back, and then we got the conclusion to the Han Solo Adventures trilogy.
Did that also come out before the movie?
Yes, it did.
So Vader's reveal?
Vader's reveal was known by
spoiled.
quite a few people. It was a massive bestseller.
Oh my gosh.
Funny thing that you don't think about it. As soon as I thought of that first one, I was like,
that secret was so highly guarded.
Yes, that's shocking to me.
Yeah.
Yep. And see, here's the thing is, even when you have something that sells as well as Star Wars, I bought the novelizations of Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones before those movies came out. Mm-hmm. And so I knew what was coming. But nobody that I went to the theater with knew.
Right.
Not a single person had also read those beforehand. That I knew. And so it's like, they're selling by the millions, but that's still a drop in the bucket compared to the number of people
you
going.
would think if I read a book about a franchise I love and it tells me that the hero's father is the main villain, wouldn't I be like...
Well, he claims to be.
Yeah, but you would think you'd be like, hey, Buddy Ross, Buddy Chris, you'll never believe what I just read in this book. Darth Vader.
And that was one of my first thoughts when I read that, is that I realized that means there are people out there who had that most dramatic of reveals spoiled for them by some big, massive a-hole in their lives. Which I'm pretty sure any judge would take as grounds for justifiable homicide.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It seems like the sort of thing that you should not be able to get away with. In today's
kidding.
world, you couldn't. That's why today the novelizations are released basically in sync with the movie to try and avoid that because of the internet. Yeah. But back in the day, they could get away with that. And, there are some people out there who have someone in their life that they've hopefully cut out of their lives.
Because need that in their life.
Yeah. So that was the last, and now we obviously we still had the Star Wars comics ongoing, but that was the last book we had published until Episode 6, Return of the Jedi novelization, which came out only days before the movie in May. And then during the rest of the year, in June, September, and November, we get the Lando Calrissian Adventures by L. Neil Smith. A trio of books, Lando Calrissian and the Mind Harp of Sharu, Lando Calrissian and the Flame Wind of Ocean, and Lando Calrissian and the Star Cave of Thonbaka.
Boy, all of those sound super, super fantasy and not very Star Wars.
Yep. Where the Han Solo ones weren't quite as bad. We had Han Solo at Star's End, Han Solo's Revenge, and Han Solo and the Lost Legacy.
Yeah, but all of those sound like plausible Star Wars titles.
They're a bit more reserved, yes.
All of those Lando ones make me think that they're taken out of a page of like the Silmarillion or something.
And then in comics in 1983, now the Star Wars comics, ongoing comic series, it did do a direct adaptation of Empire Strikes Back when it released. They synced up with the release of that. They did not attempt to sync up their storyline of the comics with Return of the Jedi, and instead released an adaptation of Return of the Jedi as a separate limited series, 4-issue limited series, and in the Marvel Super Special number 27 mass market paperback. So that's 1983. And then in 1985 to 1987, we have a couple other things. We get a few more comic series. A comic series based on the animated children's series Ewoks, 14 issues long for that series, and the Droids series of comics, which was 8 issues long, from Marvel's Star Comics line. We also got from Blackthorn Publishing, a 3-issue series called Star Wars 3D, and that's about it. So we had a couple years there where not much was going on. Quite a few, actually. So in 1983, we get those Lando Calrissian Adventures. We've got the ongoing comic series until 86. We got these few other things, but then from 86, 7 to 91, we don't really have anything going on. And then in 1991, we get Heir to the Empire, which is really what kicked off the extended universe proper.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say is that, I mean, we talked about this, I think, in some earlier episodes.
Yeah.
That basically you have the movies coming out late 70s to early 80s, and there's a whole flurry of activity all over the place, and then it basically dies out like the second half of the 80s.
Yeah.
That there's just almost nothing going on.
We don't get anything book-related for 8 years.
Yeah.
And from comics, we have a good 5-year gap there.
Yeah, and then Timothy Zahn comes out and publishes the Thrawn series, which this book is the first one in. And everybody's like, "Oh yeah, I remember Star Wars is awesome."
And it was also pretty clearly, like reading between the lines as I'm looking at this, it was pretty clearly a strong push by Lucasfilm, by their licensing division to try and rebuild interest in this and to see what they could do.
Did they?
Yeah.
So, according to Zahn, Lou Aronica of Bantam Spectra had negotiated the book deal with LucasArts in 1989. So Bantam Spectra was a branch of, was actually also owned by Random House, but was a different subsidiary than Del Rey Books. But it was a science fiction, fantasy specialized subsidiary. And they were the ones that ended up negotiating the rights to Star Wars licensed books from Lucasfilm. In 1989, they managed to do that, but then they were still working out what projects they were going to do. Publisher put Zahn's name at the top of their list of possible authors, and he got the job. He said, "My original instructions from LucasArts consisted of exactly 2 rules. The books were to start 3 to 5 years after Return of the Jedi, and I couldn't use anyone who'd been explicitly killed off in the movies."
Okay.
Yeah.
That's doable.
You can't bring anyone back from the dead, basically.
Yeah.
Zahn used information from the original film trilogy as his primary source, but supplemented that, and I did not get into these, which were basically the bridge through the 80s. What got us through was what he used here. The source books created for West End Games' Star Wars: The Role-Playing Game.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That was kind of what bridged the gap and is what Zahn used as his secondary resource, and which really his primary resource for anything not directly from the movies. He said that the West End Game sourcebook saved me from having to reinvent the wheel many times, specifically like with things like he used the interdictor cruiser from the game, but he did invent the lightsaber lock concept himself.
Wait, lightsaber lock?
Yeah, where if you get the 2 lightsabers pushing against each other and they'll kind of lock in place, and that's why they don't just slide down and You
Okay.
slice off hands without a guard.
So in other words, he was the first one to actually say that's what happens instead of just seeing it.
Yeah, we'd seen it, but
Right.
he was the one who just described the mechanics of this is what's happening there.
Right.
So,
Well, so then what about the Cortosis and I think it's pronounced Salmari or something?
the Salamari.
I did
Yeah.
not find specifics there of where those came. I think the Salamari were actually from the source books, but I'm not positive.
Okay.
And I think the Cortosis was his, but I'm not. Don't quote me on that. Well, I mean, it's on record now. So.
I have no idea what the Cortosis is.
Cortosis is a mineral that blocked lightsaber blades, basically. Like
Okay.
it would deactivate it. Like you would
Okay,
hit
yeah.
it, and it would interrupt the flow of the lightsaber blade and turn it off.
Okay. Because I knew what... that's
what the
interesting.
black armor that Kyle Katarn in the second Jedi.
I didn't play
Jedi
those
Outcast.
either.
You didn't play Jedi
No,
Outcast?
but that's interesting because that's an idea that Zahn resurrected in Alliances.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
Which I thought was stupid.
Well, fair enough.
Anyway,
So,
there we go.
Heir to the Empire was extremely well received, reaching #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. Its influence on the Star Wars Expanded Universe has been considerable. The EU had previously been primarily elaborated in RPG games and comic strips and rather esoteric media. Heir is what revitalized and opened large portions of the post-Empire extended universe and introduced popular characters like Talon Karrde, Grand Admiral Thrawn, Mara Jade, and Gilad Pellaeon.
Yep.
Bantam Spectra retained the license to publish Star Wars books for another 8 years. Their books were generally characterized as fast-paced and cinematic, pulpy, action-y fun, or if I were describing it, a lot of pandering to fans with very little variety. It was very much don't rock the boat. Don't do anything to really damage these characters in any way, shape, or form.
A lot of those books seemed to be like, well, we haven't told stories about these characters that people like.
Yeah.
So let's tell the same story, but now these are the main characters.
Or it'd be like, let's
you
tack
know?
on another to
Yeah.
Luke's list of unending adventures, where
yeah.
and they were pulp. Like, I don't want to completely denigrate it because it has a place, but it's the John Carter, the Tarzan approach, the Sherlock Holmes, where it's just like, we're going to churn out story after story about these characters, and nobody's really worried that something's going to happen to Luke here, but it's fun and it's exciting and engaging, and that's what matters. So sure, but the downside of that is it gets to be pretty samey, kind of schlocky, and when you're bringing in a lot of people to write on anything, there's always a risk of just like, well, it's just going to be, who knows what they're going to do with those characters, how well they're going to really grasp them. Meanwhile, in comics in 1991, in the late 1980s, writer Tom Veitch and artist Cam Kennedy secured a deal to produce a Star Wars comic for Archie Goodwin at Epic Comics, a Marvel imprint. But the project was announced, but then Archie Goodwin, that they were going to do that for, left Marvel, and Marvel ended up dropping the comic, and they didn't have any other ongoing Star Wars tales. So but Tom Veitch and Cam Kennedy still wanted to do that series. So I don't know if it's they convinced LucasArts or what happened, but they convinced them to transition Star Wars comic publishing from Marvel to Dark Horse Comics, who then picked up the license for that. And they published that series that Tom Veitch and Cam Kennedy wanted to do as the Dark Empire sequence, which ran from 1991 to 1995. This is the one that I always laugh at when people complain about the way the Luke Skywalker considering killing his nephew. It's like, Star Wars fans, extended universe. Luke Skywalker joins with the Emperor, falls to the dark side, wears his father's old armor, and nearly wipes out all his own friends before finally barely managing to come back to the light side thanks to his friends' dangerous plot and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, okay, we're good with that. Last Jedi. Luke Skywalker briefly considered a rather severe solution to a really nasty problem. How dare they? How dare they suggest that he would think of such a thing?
I would just like to point out that I always thought that the plot line of Luke joining the Emperor and going to the dark side,
To be fair, plenty of people have
super
dismissed
stupid.
that. Yeah,
because it's the cheapest recycling of a plot I've ever seen. It's literally, let's take the original trilogy and advance it one generation.
Yep.
Now Luke's kids are going to come after him because he's fallen to the dark side. Like,
the Dark Empire was not.
clone,
Luke did not have any kids. No one else had any kids.
But
at this
you know what I
point.
mean.
But
it
it very much
stupid.
was a recycling of the Darth Vader story.
And so I never was. I'm like, that's just dumb. So I ignored it.
It is one
And
of the
that's
more
why-
oft derided.
And I
stories,
actually
but-
didn't mind Luke in Last Jedi having the brief moment of like, holy crap,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But
there are a lot of fans out there who...
I know. And they're dumb.
And those are the ones that I'm mocking.
Yep.
Anyway, so they did the Dark Empire sequence and subsequently launched dozens of other series set after the original film trilogy, including Tales of the Jedi, which ran from 93 to 98, X-Wing Rogue Squadron, 95 to 98, Star Wars Republic, 98 to 2006, Star Wars Tales, 99 to 2005, Star Wars Empire, 2002 to 2006, and Knights of the Old Republic from 2006 to 2010. So that was Dark Horse taking over there. So we transitioned from Marvel and Del Rey to Bantam Spectra and Dark Horse Comics in the 90s. So 1992, we had 4 more book releases. We had Dark Force Rising, which was a sequel to Heir to the Empire. And then we had the first 3 books of the Jedi Prince series, The Glove of Darth Vader, The Lost City of the Jedi, and Zorba the Hutt's Revenge, which were a little more like YA approach. They were designed for a younger audience.
Can I just say how much I love the name Zorba the Hutt?
Right. 1993, we had 4 more. We had the last 3 of the Jedi Prince series, Mission from Mount Yoda, Queen of the Empire, and Prophets of the Dark Side. And then in May, we got The Last Command, the final book in the Thrawn trilogy. And those were kind of I think, Bantam feeling out the waters, going, okay, we've got this trilogy we contracted, so we'll see how that goes with Son, and obviously it's going well, so we're going to start getting new things in the pipeline, and then we're going to try out a YA approach, see how younger readers are looking at this with the Lost Prince series, and that went well. And so after that...
Turns out people of all ages love Star Wars.
It's true. So then 1994, instead of those four books, we got 6. We got The Truce at Bakura, Jedi Search...
Okay, I read Truce at Bakura. It was interesting.
Yeah.
Some good idea, like a really
Most
cool
of these
idea,
have
but
things that it's like, interesting stuff.
Some of the ideas were not executed particularly well.
We had Jedi Search, which was Kevin J. Anderson's first book in the series, I believe.
Truce at Bakura introduces the Quasar Fire Light Carrier, the Imperial Light Carrier, which we see in Rebels.
Yes.
That was its first appearance.
We got The Courtship of Princess Leia,
which I also read.
Yep. And you've
mostly kind of dumb,
yeah.
but one sweet scene towards the end of the book. There's a whole bunch of Dathomir witches chasing up on Han and Chewie, and they run, and like Leia, and they run into the Falcon, flip the engines on, and it incinerates all the witches that are behind them.
Yeah.
It's way cool. That's not the only good part of the book, though.
So then 1995. So I forgot to mention the YA books, stuff like the Jedi Prince series. In 1995 we started the Young Jedi Knights, and the year after that we got the Junior Jedi Knights, which I did read when I was young. And these were all published by a company called Boulevard, and Boulevard seems to have disappeared from the internet. I cannot find who owned Boulevard, where it was. I assume that it was probably an imprint or subsidiary involved with Bantam Spectra or with Random House, and that's why they were the ones publishing it. But I can't find anything. Maybe I was actually floored that I cannot find anything anywhere on who the heck Boulevard Books.
So if any of your listeners,
if anyone knows, I'm very curious, because I spent like 20 minutes last night just trying to track down what the heck Boulevard Books were, because you can look up the covers, you can see their symbol and their title on all of them, but it's nowhere to be found. So they were producing the younger books, but I assume, like I said, some imprint or subsidiary of Bantam or Random House. So in 1996, so we got 6 books in 94. In 95, we got 10, including the Young Jedi Knights, major ones like Ambush at Corellia or Darksaber, and Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina. 96, we got 15 Star Wars books across the age ranges.
Up.
Yeah. 1997, we got 21.
Where did the X-Wing series come in?
Well, it started with Truce at Bakura.
No, that's not X-Wing series.
Yeah,
are you sure?
The X-Wing series, I believe, started in 96, but I stopped copying the titles over at that point because there's just too many of them.
Yeah, well, because I remember I read Truce at Bakura, didn't really care for it, and it was an X-Wing series book, and I just didn't.
Are you sure? Because I thought it was a standalone.
I'm 90%
No,
certain.
there's a series of X-Wing. There might have been a standalone with X-Wing in the title. I don't know.
No.
97, we got 21, which included, in November 3rd, Spectre of the Past, which was the first of the second Thrawn duology by Timothy Zahn.
Right. That's why that sounded familiar, because I read those too.
Yeah. Those are the only Star Wars books I really read because I had already read an exhaustive number of Dragonlance books and gotten so sick of all the characters and the world and everything else, and I did not want that to happen to Star Wars. So when it came to reading Star Wars, I limited myself to just Timothy Zahn's books and Shadow of the Empire, because that was the closest I could get to playing that game, because I didn't have an N64. So Spectre of the Past then, and then 1998.
Yeah. Okay, so sorry,
No, go ahead. You're good.
You had a whole slew of them, but Truce at Bakura is not one of them. You had X-Wing Rogue Squadron.
Yeah.
In like 96 is when this starts.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Star
I seem
Wars,
to remember deleting a bunch
X-Wing
of
Regis
those.
Gamble, X-Wing the Kryptos Trap, X-Wing the Back to War, which is one of my favorites. The Back to War was really good.
That's the one that I read and hated.
Okay.
Yeah.
I liked that one. I thought it was interesting.
Didn't care for it at all.
Wraith Squadron is really great. And then Iron Fist is really pretty good. Then Solo Command, Isard's Revenge, Starfighters of Adamar. We're up to 9, by the way, now. And then Mercy Kill.
Yeah, quite a few of them.
So,
And
10 books in the X-Wing series. I think I read the first 5.
And a good chunk of those came out in 96, 97, 98.
Yeah.
Because in those years we had 15, 21, and 18 books, respectively.
Woo!
1998, also notable because it had Vision of the Future, the second half of the Thrawn duology, which was notable because it brought an end to the war between the New Republic and the Empire.
Yeah.
They reached a peace treaty where they had the Empire and the larger New Republic, and they were two independent nations, and they had a peace treaty between them.
The X-Wing series was envisioned as Star Wars meets Top Gun, and it very much feels that way when you read
that's
the books.
fair. Yeah.
It really does. Especially like when they go through like the dogfighting and stuff.
Mhm.
Like they're of the old EU, these are I think some of the best books. But it really does feel kind of Top Gunny when you're even between like the banter and stuff like that. It's kind of Top Gun, which is cool. If you like Top Gun, which you should because it's good.
Yes. Also in 1998 and 1999, Dark Horse began producing the Star Wars manga, adapting the original trilogy and the upcoming Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, as manga, with all the typical narrative and stylistic characteristics of that form.
Oh dear.
Yep. Which brings us to 1999, most noticeable, of course, because Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace was released that year, as well as its novelization 1 month before the movie came out.
Oh my goodness. Even into 99 they were spoiling it. That's crazy.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was a common thing. And that book came out, I remember that book because they had a series of different covers with different characters on the front of the book jacket. So you could have one with Obi-Wan's face there, you could have Qui-Gon or Anakin or Padme, and I was one of the lucky few who managed to snag a copy with Darth Maul's face on the cover.
Yeah.
Yes. I was pretty
Do
happy
you
about
still
that.
have the book?
Of course I do.
Yeah.
It's me, man.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not surprising that they were still doing that in 91, because that's before the real
No,
widespread-
99.
99, yeah.
99, that's right.
Yeah.
But, I mean,
The
that's-
internet was still
Yeah,
not
the
what it
internet
is
is still
today,
really
yeah.
new.
Episode 1, both the movie and the book, of course, were notable for being the first major shakeup that left previous information and stories non-canon. That had happened before with Splinter of the Mind's Eye, but that was about it.
Yeah,
There were a few. Even the Han Solo adventures and Lando Calrissian adventures were technically still part of the canon. And some of the Dark Horse comics and the books produced in the 90s specifically had sections aimed at showing where those fit into the canon and or slightly revising aspects of them. But this, episode 1 came along and went, and now we are going to have huge chunks of background story or straight up entire books that are no longer going to be canon because we decided not to pay attention to them for Phantom Menace, which really started making things confusing. It also marked the beginning of the transition back to Del Rey for Star Wars publishing, which was also owned by Random House, like I said, which is now Penguin Random House, which means it's even larger and owns even more of the publishing industry. It's a little alarming. So that one was published by Del Rey instead of Bantam, even though Bantam still technically retained the license for Star Wars novelizations, but I don't know quite the story of how that got switched, but I think partly it's because of the film novelization that Del Rey had handled the originals, and I think Del Rey possibly still retained the rights to do any film novelizations. Not sure. That's speculation on my part. But this, so that was done by Del Rey. We also, of note, in 1999, a couple months after Phantom Menace, we got on October 5th, the new Jedi Order Vector Prime, which was the official end of, not the end of Bantam Spectra, because there were a few others that came out that Bantam Spectra still had on their lines, but this was the beginning of Del Rey publishing Star Wars books. The first extended universe Del Rey books, since the only ones they'd done before that were, well, I guess no, they did have the Han Solo Adventures in Lando Calrissian, but this was the New Jedi Order era, the first book to kill off a major movie character, Chewie.
This is where they pull the moon on him.
Yeah, they land the moon on him. And introduce the Yuuzhan Vong from beyond the known galaxy as the new threat. The Del Rey books were generally characterized by more of a literary bent, meaning like generally a more slower pace and less action-focused, more character-focused. Received many familiar criticisms. How dare they kill important characters? How dare they change characters I already know into new versions of those characters? Or evolve those characters into new people? How dare they shift from familiar formats / storytelling styles / etc. Too PC, too liberal, too many female characters / writers, too many people of color characters / writers. I went looking for people's thoughts on this transition, trying to figure out what exactly had caused that transition from Bantam to Del Rey. And I found a lot of people discussing online on various message boards, on Reddit and the like, debating between the Bantam books and the Del Rey books, and yeah, those are literally things that people were saying in these messages.
Wow.
It was a nastiness, just wretched hive of scum and villainy left and right.
Wow.
People just straight up being like, I don't like how many female writers they have. They shouldn't be letting these female writers do this because they're all just too weepy and emotional. And I just want action. And it's like, oh god, well, you're not going to get any action that way.
Yeah. Which is really too bad because some of the better Star Wars books, in my opinion, like of the new canon, Claudia Gray.
Oh yeah,
and she does so good.
Yeah,
like Leia, Princess of Alderaan, is fantastic. She does. I think she did Ahsoka. I could be wrong on that. Yeah. I'm pretty sure she did Lost Stars, which is one of my favorites of these new ones. Yeah, and Lost Stars is great. And then you have somebody like Chuck Wendig, who does the Aftermath series, who's a man, who that whole series is vastly inferior to anything Claudia Gray writes. Sure. But at the same time, then there are other guys like James Luceno, who does,
Well,
basically, I guess what I'm saying is, it's stupid to say, because you're a woman, you shouldn't be writing a Star Wars
absolutely.
book. It should be, because you're a bad writer, you shouldn't be writing a Star Wars book.
Well, and I would also say, Chuck Wendig is not a bad writer. He's written a lot of things that are very impressive, but he did not turn out a great Star Wars book.
He didn't turn out 3 great Star Wars books.
But I was kind of surprised as I was going through that to be like, oh, I see. Like, for me, the huge backlash against Star Wars really began in 2017 with Last Jedi. I did not realize, and with Force Awakens a couple years before that. But really, no, this had been going on for 15, 17 years at that point.
I'm sure if the internet had been a thing in the 70s and 80s, we would have seen Leia's too, whatever.
Yeah.
She shouldn't be doing all these things. Like
that's always around.
Yeah.
Throughout 1999, Bantam Spectra published their final Star Wars books remaining in their schedule, ending with Tales from the New Republic in December. And then from 2000 onward, they did not have any new books. The license moved to Del Rey. Books aimed at younger readers began to be published by Scholastic instead of Boulevard, such as the Jedi Apprentice books that started then. As Scholastic is not affiliated with Del Rey, I can only assume that Lucasfilm and Lucas Licensing sold the license for Star Wars children books separately and then coordinated the canon loosely between the companies themselves.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So, 2000. We got 12 new novels in 2000, all from Del Rey and Scholastic. Ooh. And 2000 is also of note because this is the year that it had actually begun with Vector Prime a bit earlier, but hadn't really been made a big deal of. But in 2000, Lucasfilm and Lucas Licensing established their publishing eras for Star Wars material within the Star Wars expanded universe. And so these are the eras within the storyline, not when things were released and such. And they divided the Star Wars chronology into these eras with their own name and symbols, which here are some of the examples of the original symbols. That they did revise some of these later, so I'll try and link to those I'll link to the page I got this from Wikipedia for all of you to read in the liner notes for this episode. So nearly all novels, young reader books, role-playing games, guidebooks, comics, and audiobooks published after October 26, 2000, until the new continuity in April 2014, had these symbols and were divided by era.
Yeah, and I remember seeing these on
Yeah.
different books and things. I had no idea what they meant.
Yeah.
But
They allowed fans to determine at a glance where a particular work fell in Star Wars history, and some eras were added or relabeled as time went on, and the ultimate...
which is a very useful thing.
It was,
As
yeah.
a historian, I appreciate their effort.
The ultimate collection we had the first era was Before the Republic, which was 37,000 to 25,000 before the Battle of Yavin.
Which is the dumbest dating system in the
It is.
world.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Go listen
It's
to
all
our
I've got
episode,
here.
Dating Dementia and something or else.
Digits.
Digits, that's right.
This era explores the earliest days of the Jedi Order as the Force is explored on Tatooine, blah, 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 blah. I'm not really going to delve into all of that, but the funny thing about this era is only one work was ever published in this earliest era, Before the Republic. It was not part of the original 6 eras that they established in 2000. It was added later with the series Star Wars Dawn of the Jedi, which was meant to be a series but only ended up being one book.
Wouldn't that also cover what Knights of the Old Republic?
Nope. This
that-
is 25,000 years before A New Hope, at the latest.
And where was KOTOR?
KOTOR is in the Old Republic era, which ranges from 25,000 to 1,000 BBY. KOTOR was about 5 to 4,000 years before New Hope. This era explores the earliest days of the Galactic Republic, its protectors, the Jedi Order, and its enemies, the Sith. Mostly noticeable because of the Knights of the Old Republic series, but had other works as well, especially the Knights of the Old Republic comic series and other things. Then you had the Rise of the Empire / Clone Wars era, which is 1020 BBY, which is basically the Republic in a golden age. The Sith had survived under Darth Bane at the beginning of this and are working in the shadows throughout for apparently 1,000 years. Sure.
Thousands are nice round numbers. They like
Yeah.
to work in those thousands.
And then we have the mini era, the Rebellion era, which is 0 to 5 after the Battle of Yavin. 5 years. We all know this period. This is the original trilogy period. And the interesting thing about this to me is because of how long this era has been around, it has more works than any other era crammed into that 5 years, which is one of my most significant problems about expanded universes in general, is that's inevitably what happens. It's like you've gotten a ridiculous amount of stuff shoved into that 5 years.
Oh, but this wouldn't include things like the Thrawn series or anything
No,
like
those
that.
are all after.
Right.
This is the Rebellion era. This is basically, if it's in the old trilogy, in the original trilogy, it's in the Rebellion era, and that's it.
Well, but there are that many books?
Yeah.
Huh. Well, because I'm thinking like all the X-Wing series would have been after.
Yep. But
Yeah,
there are
everything
more
I
than
read
that.
was after.
The New Republic era is the second most significant,
Right.
I believe. And that is from 5 to 25 ABY, which focuses on the New Republic fighting for legitimacy of trying to take down the remains of the Empire, etc., 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 and ends with that truce between the New Republic and the Galactic Empire that I mentioned earlier. After that, you get the New Jedi Order era, which was the Del Rey books established, which goes from 25 to 37 ABY, which involves the Yuuzhan Vong invasion and eventually defeat, and then the Killik invasion, the Dark Nest, etc., which I don't know much about because when New Jedi Order was introduced, I looked at that and went, interesting, I guess. Like, the idea of having this weird alien race invading the galaxy that conveniently coincides with the peace between the New Republic and the Galactic Empire is interesting, I guess, but like I said, I was limiting how many Star Wars books I picked up, and I was just like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah.
I liked what Zahn did, but I don't really want more. And then after that, you get the Legacy era, which I have looked a little bit at because I got curious about what the heck. I had never heard of the Legacy era until not too long ago when I picked up some Legacy comics at the library where I work and was like, well, what are these? And started flipping through them and went, what are these? This is utterly unfamiliar to me at all. It had a clearly defined beginning, it says, but it also gives me two different dates of when it began, either 37 ABY or 40 ABY. 40 ABY originally, and then a short story was introduced that took place 3 years before that, and they decided it was part of the Legacy era. Okay. Is what happened. But this is basically the reset button. It's like, okay, we did the Yuuzhan Vong, we did the Killik invasion. Civil War, Second Galactic Civil War. Why not? And we're gonna have Jason Solo fall to the dark side, and we're gonna have this. And they did some...
We're going to retell the exact same story.
Well, somewhat. Like, the one thing that was interesting about this is he, as Darth Caedus, basically was functioning as a means to end the Civil War. Is that everyone united against him, was the idea, and then they defeated him, and it ended the Civil War. And, which is is a different take, at least. But, and then there were things happening nearly 100 years later, but they never brought about an official end to the Legacy era before Disney took over and wiped the slate.
Thank heavens.
Yeah. So then you also had, in addition to those 7 eras, you had the Infinities label, which is for stories released under the official Star Wars banner, but were not meant to be considered part of the Star Wars canon. Some of these are alternate versions of stories covered elsewhere in the continuity, but with events which cannot be reconciled with other stories. Some are explicitly alternate universe tales, and others are pure parodies, like the Star Wars Shakespeare books.
Which are so good. Go read them.
As opposed to, so like the Star Wars Infinities is a series of comics published by Dark Horse, which is interesting. I picked them up at the library just the other day because I was shelving stuff and I saw this cover of one of these that had Princess Leia with the buns on the side of her head and the white dress and a blue lightsaber fighting Darth Vader. And I went, I'm intrigued. And so I flipped it over and was reading the back, and the premise of the Star Wars Infinities comics were that they were each retellings. You have the New Hope retelling, you have Empire Strikes Back, and the Return of the Jedi retellings, but they're all with something slightly altered. And so what happened with the New Hope one is Luke made his shot, the torpedoes went in, and then because of a flaw in the torpedoes, they detonated prematurely and did not destroy the Death Star, merely damaged its weapon systems. So the Death Star survived, did not have enough power to destroy Yavin 4, but was able to wipe out most of the Rebel base. And the survivors that survived that first blast were able to get off planet, but then were captured by the fleet coming from the Death Star. And the only ones that survived and escaped were Han, Chewie, and Luke. And so you have this different alternate version where Han and Chewie and Luke, like the Empire still has its Death Star that they're fixing. Han and Chewie and Luke are on the run, and Leia has once again been captured by the Empire. And there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on. Like, that premise right away is pretty interesting. And you've got this interesting stuff where Luke thinks that Leia and the rest of the rebellion have been killed, and he is not handling it well. He is having some serious anger issues and some... And like, you've got Ben appearing to him and basically being like, whoa, okay, this is what the dark side is all about. You need to stop. And you have Han who's just like, no, like, rebellion's over, kid. We lost. And that's just making him angrier. And then you have Leia, meanwhile, who is in custody on Coruscant of the Emperor and Darth Vader, and they're basically slowly working to brainwash her to the Empire.
That'd be awesome.
You'd think so.
Evil Leia.
It was a very interesting premise with ultimately what was rather poor execution. It kind of flubbed off. Like, it was very much like, they don't really get who these characters are, first off, and really how to plot a story. I literally went in to see if they were written by the same people that wrote Rogue One, which sounds like just some random insult, but it's the Rogue One of the main writers was Chris Weitz, and one of the main writers of Star Wars Infinities was Chris Webber. And so all I saw was the Chris W.E. and went, no. Well, I'd believe it. But no. And so I went and looked it up, and I was like, okay, no, that would have been too much of a coincidence. No. But yeah, it was one of those where there were a lot of little things where I was just like, okay, you don't get... Like, you can't have that character do that. I hate to be the one to say that, but look, it was interesting because Ben, he appears to Luke when he's arguing with Han, and it's like, okay, I need you to go to Dagobah right now, which is much earlier in the timeline than that normally happened. And with this, so they go to Dagobah. There was a nice little moment that I did enjoy where Yoda's doing his whole little shtick of, we're looking for someone you are, and all of that stuff. And Luke's sitting here getting angry and stuff, and just like, he's wasting our time. And Han's just sitting there kicked back with his feet up, and he's just like, you don't get it, do you, kid? This is Yoda. He's just messing with you. And Luke's just like, what? And Yoda's just like, perceptive you are. And Han's just like, takes a con to no one. And I was just like, I don't know if I actually buy that, but I like it. Yeah. It's good fan service, so I'll allow it. But yeah, Yoda ends up going with them. He has them drop him off on the Death Star, uses Jedi mind tricks to get them released so that they can fly off to go rescue Leia, while he basically straight up mind controls Moff Tarkin.
Dang.
To take over the Death Star, use it to destroy most of the Imperial fleet, and then crash lands the Death Star into the Imperial Palace on Coruscant to kill Palpatine. thereby basically wiping out life on half of Coruscant in the process. And I'm no, that's not a Yoda move, dudes. Like, that's, no. And the weirdest thing for me is, as I was reading it, I was having a really hard time pegging what was off about it to me until I realized that the problem was these people were writing Luke and Han and Leia as though these are like really good friends who all love each other so much, because that's the idea they've got in their head after years and years of the Star Wars universe existing. Yep. And I'm sitting there going, no, these people have known each other for like 24 hours at this point when he fails to destroy the Death Star. And you've got Han being weirdly like, I'll put up with a lot of stuff, and we're good friends. Yeah. And Han's really concerned about Leia, and it's just like they don't know each other. That's the biggest flaw. Anyway, and The Empire Strikes Back. So The Empire Strikes Back is not a continuation of that story. It is, okay, Episode 4 happened just as it did, and then something changed in Episode 5, and so we're getting a different and alternate. Yeah. So in Episode 5, Han is too late, and Luke dies in the cold. I don't know what happens. I haven't read that one. And I'm not sure I want to after the quality of the first one. But yeah. And then Episode 6, what happens is that point where when Jabba's speaking with Leia in disguise when she's brought in Chewie for the bounty, and gets upset and knocks 3PO off of the side, he knocks him hard enough that it actually breaks 3PO, and he's not functioning. And Leia does not have a translator to speak to Jabba anymore. And so she can't understand what he's saying, and he gets upset and sick of her and tries to send her away. And so she basically resorts to, okay, crap, taking off the mask, gonna have to improvise, and ends up tossing the thermal detonator.
Yeah.
And Boba Fett ends up stealing Han's body to sell to the Empire, and they're still trying to chase him down in the points where they would have been doing other things during the story. All very interesting, but not executed as well as I personally would like. Anyway, so my little digression on the Star Wars Infinities comics. Though. Yeah. So those all fell under the Infinities banner, which was for the non-canon stuff. And that was in 2000 that all those eras were introduced. 2001, we got 12 new books. 2002, we got 17 new books, including the Episode 2 Attack of the Clones novelization, which also came out 1 month before the movie. 2003, we got 14 new books. 2004, we got 15 new books. 2005, we got 11, including the novelization of Episode 3, which is the only prequel novelization I did not buy. I just didn't have the money at the time, and I've never gotten around to getting it. Although I will say that I love the prequel, the prologue of that book. I've mentioned it before on here, I know, but just really well written. It was great. That one was written by Matthew Stover. So if you have the chance to pick up the prequel, the prologue, I actually wanted to read it to everyone, but the only, read a sample I could find online cut off like 2 lines before the best part of the thing. At the very end of it, I was just like, no! How could you do that? Anyway, 2006, we got...
That's probably why they did it.
Yeah, probably. I was hoping they'd at least give us the whole prologue, you know? Yeah. Because it's seriously like a paragraph and a half before the ending of the prologue. 2006, we got 9 new books, including Legacy of the Force Betrayal on May 30th, which began the Legacy era. 2007, we got 11. 2008, we got 15. So, ongoing, a lot of these. 2009, we got 10. And 2010, we got 11. 2010 also marked the newest shakeup in comics. Knights of the Old Republic and the Legacy comics and Knights of the Old Republic comics ended in 2010. And instead of publishing ongoing series, Dark Horse began publishing a series of miniseries. Which a lot of, like, just Star Wars Agent of the Empire, Star Wars Blood Ties, Dark Times, Dawn of the Jedi, etc., etc. The Old Republic, which tied in with the Old Republic series, but I was curious about that. It made me wonder if Dark Horse had already heard rumors of the Disney deal, even though that was 2 years before that was actually announced. Which would make a lot of sense if they already knew that was coming, because the second that Disney deal was announced, Dark Horse basically knew, like, we haven't been told, but we're not keeping the license for Star Wars.
Right.
Yeah, they're gonna move that to Marvel now. There's no reason why they wouldn't if Disney owns it. But it does make me wonder. They stopped doing ongoing series 2 years before that deal was announced, and it makes me wonder if they knew something was coming and so just went, well, we don't want to have anything ongoing when that happens, so we're just going to do little mini-series from now on. Who knows? Don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting.
2011, we got 8 books, 6 in 2012 and 2013 each. And then we got to 2014. The last 2 novels of the original extended universe, Maul Lockdown in January 28th. And Honor Among Thieves, a Han Solo story set in the Rebellion era. on March 4th.
So all of these that are still coming out, though, even though they're after the Disney deal, are
No,
still
that-
non-canon, right?
No.
So these did not come out after the Disney deal. These were all after Dark Horse stopped publishing ongoing series.
Well, I thought that the deal happened in 2012.
And the
didn't
deal
it?
in 2012 was officially announced that it was going to happen.
Yes.
Okay.
But it didn't actually
And
go into
then-
effect until
that's right.
2014.
That's where I got confused
Yeah.
because between 2012 and 2014, people were still publishing stuff, and
Yeah.
Disney was like, we haven't decided how we're going to proceed.
Yeah.
And
And Disney
then in
basically gave them a
2014
date at which point they're like, this is where it's not going to go. This is where it goes into effect. So
Yeah.
this is everyone timed their schedules to basically
Right. So
stop
there was
around that.
one book, and that's the one I was thinking of, is the Darth Plagueis one. Came
Yeah,
out
that
in
was in-
2014, but like
No, it was
the month
December
before-
2013.
Okay, yeah,
for that
but
one.
like just a couple months before. It's basically the last book
the
published.
last
Yeah.
one was Honor Among Thieves, March 4th, and then on April 25th, 2014.
Yeah, Disney said
Disney,
everything
yeah.
before this day is
Dang.
gone.
Yeah,
Poor
it's
book only
it's a-
had, 3 months worth of canonism?
No. It had a month and a half, March
and a half.
4th to
Canonicity,
April
yeah.
25th. And announced that the old EU would now be called Star Wars Legends, and were no longer considered canon,
And I rejoiced.
and began their new shared universe with only 3 not-so-official eras, not like before. The prequel era, the original era, and the sequel era. Pretty simple so far. Del Rey continues to publish adult-oriented Star Wars books for Disney. And then books aimed at younger readers have since then have been published by the newly formed Disney Lucasfilm Press, an imprint of the Disney Book Group, which is a subsidiary of Disney Publishing Worldwide. Which I think is probably a nervous moment for Del Rey, where they're like, okay, we'll do whatever you want, because they know that, if Disney decides
can
the money's
pull it,
not in it,
yeah.
Disney will just go, we'll just start let's start our own publishing company. We've already got a couple. And so we got our very first, in 2014 already, we got our very first Disney-owned, of the new canon publications on August 5th. We got Rise of the Rebels and Ezra's Gamble, both released just 2 months before the Rebels TV series, as to try and gear up engagement for that. Those are both in the younger audience
young
area,
readers.
published by Disney Lucasfilm Press. And then we got the first adult-aimed book, A New Dawn, on September 2nd, which was also tying into Rebels.
Yep.
But
And it
from
was
a
really pretty good.
from a more adult perspective, yeah. And then we also got a couple more.
It's how Kanan meets Hera.
Oh, is it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh.
And then
Got
we
it if you want to borrow.
a couple more later that year, after this Rebels began, that tied in on the younger side. We got Servants of the Empire, Edge of the Galaxy, and The Rebellion Begins. And then on the older side, we got Tarkin.
Tarkin is so
Yeah.
good.
And
Tarkin is
then
good.
we also got on November 18th the first non-Rebels novel of the Disney era, Droids in Distress. Tarkin was the first non-Rebels novel.
Yeah.
My organization was not clear as I was reading here. And then Droids in Distress was Rebel related.
Yeah.
So we got 9 books in 2014, 2 from the old continuity, and then 7 from Disney. 2 adult and 5 younger. And then in comics, to no one's surprise, Marvel at San Diego Comic-Con 2014 announced that they would be publishing Star Wars comics from then on, beginning with 2 ongoing series, Star Wars and Star Wars Darth Vader, as well as a limited miniseries, Star Wars Princess Leia.
Yep.
And also announced that they would continue to publish that they would begin publishing collections of old Legends comics through Marvel.
Yep, and you can get those now, the big anthology ones. They're fat.
Yeah.
I bet.
And that's basically been the state. Marvel has had numerous other comic series mini-series that they've done, like Poe Dameron and Han Solo and a couple others.
They've introduced a few new ongoing ones. Dr. Afra.
Yeah, Dr. Afra with the ongoing, a couple others. And then we've had several Star Wars books. We've had Disney did not slack off on the number. 2015 we got 18 of them. 2016 we got 15. 2017 we got 20. 2018 we got 12. And in 2019 so far we have 1. A Pirate's Price.
We already have 1 this year.
Yeah. Pirate's Price, January 8th. By the time this episode airs, we may have more. It's a junior novel illustrated by Annie Wu and written by Lou Anders.
And I own and have read most of what has been published since Disney wiped it.
In the last 5 odd years.
Comics and books. I don't have some of the young reader ones, like the Droids in Distress and stuff. I don't have those.
Yeah.
But I have almost all of the young reader ones, like There's like Smugglers, something or other that's like a Han Solo story that I have. But I've got all the adult-oriented ones except for like 2 or something like that. Basically, I was like, I don't feel like paying full price. I'll wait a little bit and then get it on Amazon for cheap. So, yeah, they're pretty good.
So that is the history of Star Wars publishing to the current date. So it began as just a few tie-ins here and there to try and drum up interest to make some extra money when they didn't realize how successful it would be.
And now it's a major portion of...
And then in the 90s, it became a major moneymaker, the primary Star Wars moneymaker at the time, and drummed up a lot of interest that definitely made it clear that the special editions and then the prequels would be worth the money that they would spend on them.
Yeah.
And then grew into its own media empire before the greatest media empire of all decided, we're gonna buy that all up and just start churning it out for ourselves.
Yep.
So what is the ratio of the short series to long series compared to old and new Legends? So like back in the mid 90s, you would get several long stretching series, the X-Wing series, and a bunch of others like that, which we don't seem to have so far. Are they going to do that?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, because the X-Wing series had, 5 that were sort of main, and then 5 more that were sort of 5 main ones, then like a trilogy that sort of tied into it, and then 2 more that were sort of standalones, so for a total of 10.
Disney's approach so far definitely seems to be more of a individual projects approach. Like, we'll greenlight a trilogy here and there.
Yeah, so you have like the Aftermath trilogy, you have the Thrawn trilogy, but everything else has been single books.
Yeah. With the exception of the comics, where they had the ongoing Star Wars comics. Although I believe Star Wars Darth Vader did come to a close last year.
Star Wars Darth Vader came to a close, then immediately after that they opened a new one that was like Lords of the Sith Darth Vader.
Oh yeah.
So they
have the
just
first one of that.
So they have. So there's Darth Vader, which was set in between 4 and 5, that was parallel to what was going on in the Star Wars series. And then they did like this Star Wars Lord of the Sith one or whatever, where it goes back to between episodes 3 and 4 and what was Darth Vader doing to help sort of mush all rebellion and discontent in the Empire. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Also, Ross, let me look this up real quick because I want to get...
Although Vader does appear, of course, in the ongoing Star Wars series and Dr. Aphra series.
Sure.
Oh my gosh, I just finished the last Dr. Aphra, or the latest Dr. Aphra trade paperback. Oh my gosh. It was shocking.
I've seen all of those. I've shelved them, but I haven't read most of them. I've glanced over. I did read the Captain Phasma miniseries.
The Phasma one was good just because it shows how ruthless she is.
Yeah, that was nice to see. So that was not badly done, but I have not picked up most of those.
Some of them, and this is going to be true with just about anything. Some are better than others.
Yeah.
Like some of the Star Wars main series issues have not been great. Like some of the storylines I've just been like, okay, let's just hurry and get through this, okay? But then there are others that have been really good, like the Burning Seas compilation, that's the Siege of Mon Cala, and like the subjugation of Mon Cala was a really good story. Really, really good story. The first few Dr. Aphras have been really good. This last one was actually pretty good. The one before this last one was, I thought, a little bit less. So there's some up and downs, but overall they're pretty good. So I recommend them.
All right. So I mentioned in our last episode...
Kanan. So Kanan was supposed to get his own ongoing series. Then didn't do so well, so they canned it after the second batch of issues, so it became a two-series miniseries, yeah. But those are really, really good. It makes me sad that they didn't continue, because they're very good.
Right.
Lots of flashbacks between like what's going on now that is kind of going on with what was going on in Rebels at the time, to flashback of me being a young Padawan escaping and surviving after Order 66. And those were really quite good.
So Ross, I have this prescient feeling that in the next episode, we are going to briefly mention the Thrawn duology, and I'm going to say, no, actually, there was a third book. I'm going to tell you about that right now, actually, so that you don't need to ask me about it in the future. So that there was it was called Survivor's Quest, was one of Del Rey's books released. And so the original, that's Thrawn duology, were some of the later Bantam Spectra books. And then a couple of years later, Del Rey published Survivor's Quest by Timothy Zahn, which was written to be a sequel to the Thrawn books, the Thrawn duology, focusing on Luke and Mara, and as a kind of a weird like parallel novel to Tatooine Ghost, which focused on Han Solo and Princess Leia. And it's not a direct sequel, but it does examine. But that book ended with them discovering like, oh, Thrawn had gone out to the unknown regions, and we don't know what he was doing there. And this book focused on going out there and meeting the Chiss, finding out some of what had been going on.
Okay.
And so it was in some ways a thematic sequel to that, but it was basically another Zahn book that focused on the same things and was billed as a sequel to that. But it's more of a standalone that happens to tie in.
I was going to say, because that duology, I mean, it wrapped itself up pretty
nice. It very
nice.
much is a duology, yeah. But I laughed when I saw this because it was like, yeah, it's a sequel to that. And I was like, it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, it is in the sense that everything written after that is a sequel to that, but no.
Okay.
So yeah, and it was simultaneously a sequel to the Thrawn duology and a sequel to Outbound Flight, which was another book that Timothy Zahn was writing for Del Rey, and was like, hey, as long as I'm going to write something that you want something to tie into that, why don't I tie it into both?
Yeah.
So
is he? Well, I know. I guess he would have a hard time competing with like the X-Wing series, but like, has he done the most writing for the Star Wars?
I don't know that the X-Wing series was all by the same author. I believe those are by different authors.
There were 2 authors that worked together on the series.
So at this point, I would venture a guess that Timothy Zahn has written more Star Wars books than anyone else.
Because there's 7.
You got the original Thrawn trilogy.
3 Thrawns.
You got the Thrawn duology. You got Outbound Flight and Survivor's Quest. And then you've got the new Thrawn trilogy, which he's written 2 of.
I'm even thinking,
and he's
just
got the third one coming.
But,
yeah. And so
that's
10 right there with the third one that's
good.
coming, and that's just the ones I know about. So, yeah, he's done.
He's prolific, I think we could say,
relatively
in Star Wars.
Yeah, he's the Star Wars book writer, really, when it comes down to it. But so yeah.
So, what are your favorites? Yours was Truce of Bakura.
Well,
Talk a lot about that one.
Truce of Bakura has some really interesting ideas, but then a lot of really dumb stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, like, I liked the idea of the Republic going to these Imperial officers that are left and are basically like, hey, why don't you come play ball with the New Republic so that we can do this the easy way and not have to send the Republic fleet in here and crush you. And so, like, that was kind of interesting. And I thought the Sea-Rook, I think is what they're called, or Sea-Ruvi, something like that, were the aliens in the Truce of Bakura that come from outside of this galaxy or whatever. You know, it's essentially unknown regions, but we're not going to call it unknown regions. Mm-hmm. That they show up. And one thing that I thought was interesting, but then it just, I don't know, it's kind of dumb, is that they powered their ships not through combustion or some sort of fuel like that their ships were all powered through life force. So their whole military machine was built around capturing prisoners so you can extract their life force, their force ghosts or whatever, and power your machines.
Huh.
So it was cool to see them, like, carpet bombing cities with, like, nerve gas that knocked people out, and then they send down ground teams to just scoop everybody up and throw them on the wheelbarrow kind of a thing, take them back to the ships. And then they particularly valued force users because they were extra juicy or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So it's like, that's an interesting concept of an alien species that needs to take prisoners alive.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess that's more interesting than just your typical smash and grab kind of just shoot everything on sight, you know. Okay. But then they introduced something real weird, because then, like, their force essence or whatever was still in the machines. So then Luke, as he's strapped there trying to get his essence sucked out or whatever by these aliens, he's, like, hearing the voices of all these people trapped in the ship, and he's using their, like, it just got weird.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's like you had this cool idea, and then it just became
got too far
bizarre,
out there.
you know, way too weird. And then, like, for the world, you know, your galaxy-ending threat that these aliens were supposed to be, that they were billed at in the first half of the book, it wasn't like a trilogy or anything. It wraps itself up in one book. So, even reading it in, I think I read it in junior high, it was like, so there are these big baddies that are impenetrable, and we somehow defeat, like, their entire fleet and civilization in the course of, like, half a book. Really?
Yeah.
So either they weren't as big a threat as you said, or they weren't as big a threat as you said.
It's kind of like the end of Avengers. It's just like, oh no, an alien army. Oh wait, they can be killed by bullets. Well, man,
we got plenty of those.
Yeah, heck, they're not going to get past 34th.
Yeah. So,
They shouldn't have come to America.
I liked Truce at Bakura. Like, overall, I would still say, like, thumbs up. Mm-hmm. But I liked the X-Wing series, particularly, like, the Wraith Squadron books, or book, I should say. But, because those books, I don't know, they felt more real, because, I mean, it said, I didn't realize at the time until I just read it here on the podcast, but that they were Top Gun, supposed to be, like, inspired, you know? And they really did feel that way. And so each book was kind of like this is the mission you're going on, and we're going to take a whole book to get you from mission briefing to mission complete.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of cool build-up. You could see them planning things out. Things would go awry. They would have to adapt, and then they'd eventually overcome, and good, we finished that mission.
So you liked it because it was an RTS in book form?
Kind of. Well, but no, I mean, but the characters were really quite good as well, and since they were the same characters for, 5 books, you got to really know them, and they were, obviously written by the same author, so they're intentionally building off the events of the previous book. So that was kind of fun, too, to just see the character development.
Series.
Yeah, a real proper series. Yeah, exactly. But then they had things like the Bacta War, which I'm like, that makes a great deal of sense for this universe, that Bacta is this miracle healing drug, and whichever side controls the most of it is going to suffer the least losses, so it's very important that we, the New Republic, get a hold of the Bacta facilities that produce this. I'm like, that makes abundant sense for this universe.
And so the food, who controls the weapons.
Exactly, and so then you have whole missions of them going like, hey, the Imperials have this Bacta facility, we need to get in there and take it from them without destroying the facility, because we need it, And I remember there was this one, Coruscant was holding out, right? It was still this Imperial holdout in the core, right? Which made it a big problem, because it can hit a lot of these resource-heavy planets, production-heavy planets in the core. And, the Republic fleet couldn't touch it, because they had these giant planetary shields that just shielded the entire planet, right? So it was impervious from bombardment, and so then they had to go, undercover and infiltrate the planet and try to disable one of the shield generators so that they could get X-Wings in under the shield to go bomb the rest of everything, and then the fleet can show up or whatever. And that whole thing was like a spy thriller, because they're all undercover, they're all pretending to be pilots, mercenaries, and so it was just, you got kind of a wide variety of types of missions and sort of genres, I guess, almost. Some of them would be straight up dogfighting, Top Gun. Then you'd have a spy thriller. Then you'd have, whatever. But it was all still the same story. So I really, really, really enjoyed that series of books a lot.
See, I would actually, with the exception of the Thrawn series, liked all of the standalones. And the ones focusing on the main cast.
Yeah, see, and I never read almost any of those. I mean, I read The Courtship of Princess Leia because it had a Rancor on the front. And I'm like, well... got a Rancor on the front.
The later version of the cover did. The original version actually had Leia in a wedding dress.
Oh.
And other stuff going on around it, but they changed it for later hardback printings and for the paperback printings because they were afraid that the sales were being damaged because it looked too much like a romance novel.
Yeah.
Which I can totally see, and it, in a lot of ways, was, and which is probably why teenage boy didn't like it as much.
Abducting Leia against
for sure.
Get.
But also, if you recall, listeners, back to some of our early episodes where I talked about getting the Star Wars Vehicles and Vessels book from the school book fair, right? It had these things called the Happen Battle Dragons and the Happen Battle Stations in there. And I'm like, well, who are these people? I've never heard of these. I've not seen these on this, whatever. And then I realized, there are books out there that talk about these things. Okay. And so, and it gives you a reference in that book of the Happen Battle Dragons appear in The Courtship of Princess Leia. And I'm like, sweet, I want to see these things in action. It's talking about how many turbo lasers they have and stuff. This will be awesome if we can see the... So I read this book, and they're almost non-existent in the book. That book was kind of a disappointment in a lot of ways. Because I'm like, I wouldn't mind seeing the courtship of Princess Leia and Han Solo. But it was mostly oh yeah? Happen Prince? Well, I'm Han Solo and I like her too. And Princess Leia's like, I don't know, I can't choose. And then it's okay, oh look, we're abducted, oh, we're on this crashed planet. And then they get to the end of the book and it's kind of okay, well, I like Han Solo now. And the Happen Prince is oh, well, too bad, but love is love. I respect that, princess. Bye. And it's like, wow, so not much real, like, courtship or intrigue that way. And really, like I've said before, even in this episode, the only really, like, cool part of that book was when Han Solo fries the witches with his Falcon's engines.
See, and like I said, I only read the Timothy Zahn books and Shadow of the Past, which I did enjoy Shadow of the Past. But because I didn't want it all spoiled for me. Like, I'd had that with Dragonlance, where just over time I get nauseated with just how much of these characters, and even with just knowing some of the stuff that went on in the expanded universe, it was too much for me, where I was just like, it's just so, like, Luke Skywalker has never had an entire month to just do anything. Yeah. Like, this man has not filed his taxes in 20 years because he can't ever find enough freaking time to do it. Like,
let the man have a weekend where he can play Halo and eat pizza.
Exactly. And it's like, this man has no downtime whatsoever. It's like, on the one hand, no wonder it took him so long to get married. It's like, he had no time. It's like, Mara Jade, sure, you're basically the only woman I've ever carried on a conversation with, and might as well.
That wasn't my sister.
To. Yeah, that wasn't my sister. And then you got all these people complaining about Jason Solo falling to the dark side in the Legacies era and stuff, and I'm just like, well, can you blame him? He can't have been parented that well. His parents were always busy with life or death situations, and when they weren't, he was, as a child. Like, seriously, this is ludicrous to the point of idiocy. It just frustrated me so much when, and you know, people just want more. It's popcorn, it's fun, but it was never fun for me. I couldn't turn off my brain enough to go, sure, this is plausible. It ratchets up to this point of just like, this is just dumb.
Well, and that's why I hope in the future, and I don't know how likely this is, probably not very, honestly, but I would like to see it, is the Star Wars galaxy is a fun place.
Yep.
You know, it's a fun place to go and romp and have your awesome adventures. It really is. But I would like to see something either far removed, like a century or more, in either direction from the prequels and the sequels.
Yeah.
And to just say, look, there's plenty of room out there to go and play and have fun and have your adventures with awesome heroes. But if we make new stuff, then that does give us more room to play rather than trying to shove all the fun into 20 minutes. You know what I mean? So I hope that we see that. I don't know the plausibility of that.
I think, like, with Rian Johnson's trilogy, that is basically, as far as we don't know what's going on. Yeah, but it's ostensibly not immediately connected to anything that's going on. And so I'm hoping to see more of that. And see, because that's the thing, is a lot of my favorite stories are the ones where they're just like, just whatever. You know, I like the Kyle Katarn video games, and they do tie in here and there, but for the most part, they're just their own self-contained stories. Right. And they're solid. They're fun. Knights of the Old Republic. Probably my favorite non-movie Star Wars product out there. And it's, you know, they basically just went, you know what, let's just remove ourselves from the original so far that we just don't have to pay attention to them at all.
You got Jedi and Sith, but that's about it.
Yeah, well, exactly. And we got Jedi and Sith, we got lightsabers, we got blasters, we got ships.
And that's what I'm saying, both for books and for future media, you know, like movies and TV shows and stuff. That's what I'm saying is, put your story in a slingshot and shoot it far away, and let's go play there.
Exactly.
You know.
Yeah. Well, and even with the extended universe, even with moving on into the future, it's, you know, you hear people talk about, I can see why so many people were so pissed that Rey isn't a Kenobi or isn't a Skywalker, because that was what the extended universe did. It was very much everything that is not a prequel is Luke, Leia, and Han. Maybe a bit of Lando if we want to pretend that we're not being racist. And then it's their children, and then it's like they had in the Legacies era, they had that one that jumps 100 years to the future with nothing bridging between the end of the most recent Legacy stuff we've seen and it still stars a Skywalker.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, it's too much. It's like, you had this world that was apparently just trucking along, and then this dude Anakin was born, and after that, he entire galaxy just revolved around him forevermore. And his descendants, and it's dumb.
And that's why
it's predictable.
Applaud so vigorously the decision to have Rey be Rey no parents.
Exactly.
This
is not a legacy thing. Anyone can be cool.
Yeah,
anyone can do this.
They need to not back down on that point.
I at this point, like, before Last Jedi came out, I was worried. I was like, it's possible that they'll try and pull some gimmick or something. And maybe they've thought of something I can't think of that would actually be cool. I don't
I
so,
doubt
though.
it, though.
Yeah, and so I was like, so I can't think of anything that would be cool enough. Most of it would just come off as kitschy, as just schlock, and so when they did that, I was like, oh, thank goodness! Like that's really the only thing they could do that would be in any way validating or good. And so at this point, now that they did that, I'm reasonably confident that they're not going to be dumb enough to go back on that.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was just always too much with all the Skywalkers, and then also it was like watching a TV series, especially an older TV series, where it's like, we got to reestablish the status quo. Everything, it's like, yeah, they introduced, they had children, so we're going to keep those children around, and that we're going to send them off to boarding school so that these people can still go do cool stuff without having to worry about the kids being around. And those kids are going to, those boarding schools are going. Luke Skywalker's Jedi Academy is as bad as Hogwarts. I mean, come on, that place is freaking dangerous. Go read the Junior Jedi.
Yeah, it's true. You had Dark Jedi popping up literally like every couple of months.
Yeah, you had ancient ruins full of all sorts of Force
ghosts and
students falling to the dark side. I mean,
left and right.
Everything.
Luke's a bad teacher.
Yep, every version of him, and so and it was just like. But it became this thing where it's like, yeah, you're introducing new characters, you're evolving the world in some ways, but the thing is, it's all really predictable, because we know that you're not going to touch these characters. That's part of why I remember when the new Jedi Order books started, and I picked up one, it was actually it was one of the later sequels. It wasn't Vector Prime where Chewie died, but it was one after that focused on Han dealing with Chewie's death. And I was like, wait, what? They killed Chewie? And that, I sat up, that got my attention. I almost bought the book right there. And I probably would have if I had had the money, just because I was like, they actually changed something. And granted, they picked the character who was least of a character in the originals, but at least they actually had the balls to kill someone. And the rest of everyone else was sacrosanct, It's like, you could not mess with them. And it was, and some of these comments that I was like, I've heard some people complain because, they just killed Chewie in such a dumb way. And I'm like, okay, whatever. But a lot of these comments I was finding online while I was researching for this episode, that wasn't what people were saying. They were saying, they killed Chewie. Like, how dare they? Like, that was a bad, these people are idiots who obviously don't know what they're doing. And it's like, people die. Characters wear out. Like, you can't, and character death is a moving and useful storytelling tool, among other things. And having all your main characters be these legacy characters who all have to be basically divine gods who cannot have any real lasting flaws in any way, and who cannot die, and who only exist to basically be an audience insert to imagine how perfect we would all be in that situation. It's dull. And that's what Last Jedi is about, is basically saying, you can't think of Luke like that because we can't tell a story like that that's actually going to be good. Like, it's not real, for one. And we'll just fall into the same things that he was already doing. Like, we wiped that out for a reason. And so the very fact that The Last Jedi got made makes me hope that we're not going to fall into that trap, but I also still feel like it's an inevitability. That, the more people you give space in this universe, the more likely it is that eventually we're just going to fall into the same traps. But for now, I'm along for the ride.
I think it will be staved off for longer, simply because Disney has put way more effort into keeping a unified story, and like, because Lucas was a lot of like, what do you want to do again? Okay, yeah, just go do that.
There
That's
was
fine.
a lot of
like
that.
He a lot of times didn't care, which is why you got ridiculous things happening. Where he's just like, well, if it ends up being a problem, we'll just ignore it. Where Disney is saying, okay, we're going to like, what exactly are you doing in your story?
They're still turning out
I
a
know
dozen
that
plus
they are.
books a year, and
I
comic
know
books.
that well, but also the books revolve. These books that Disney's putting out don't revolve as heavily around your A team.
Yeah.
You know
the
what I mean?
legacy characters.
So that helps it branch out as well. Like where you have like what is it, like Rebel Rising or whatever, or New Dawn or whatever it was with. It's like, okay, this is a story about two main characters from the TV show we're about to launch. Okay, that's like kind of removed. You know what I mean? And
it
so
just,
you get these stories from these. It's less focus on, oh, well, we have to do Han, Leia, and Luke, and their kids, and then their kids, and then their kids.
Well, and we just killed off Han and Luke.
Yeah. And so that's between them having authors branch out to less spotlight-centric characters. as well as their overall, the story group that does say, okay, like, what is going to be in your story so we can make sure this puzzle piece fits. And if it doesn't, you need to change, not us. I think that will give us a longer shelf life before.
But it's also a question of what they choose to focus on, you know? It's like, yeah, right now, I appreciate that the idea that maybe that we're going to step out into areas we haven't seen before, we're going to focus on new characters. That I appreciate. But where I start getting leery is like, oh, we wrote this book, Catalyst, to tie into this standalone movie. Okay, tie in. It's not even a novelization. That's nice. They did do novelizations, obviously, of Rogue One, but they had... it's like, we're going to do this as kind of a prequel to this standalone movie. Okay, cool. Okay, and here's a standalone movie. Okay, sure. Why not? There's literally nothing that can happen after that, so there shouldn't be two more. Well, now we're going to do an entire series focused on one of the characters from Rogue One. Okay. But you realize, like, if you just replace the legacy characters with new legacy characters, you could have a problem. And granted, you know, Catalyst did not focus on Cassian, so that this isn't the same thing. But, you know, it's just... depends on how much they build around what's already there. It's like, do we keep building around Rogue One? Because Rogue One's already flush up against New Hope. There's not much room to build here.
Yeah.
Or are we going to step away and go, okay, that was fun, now let's go somewhere else? Because in that continuity, it's like, yeah, we're going to have Cassian, but we're that's going to bump against Rebels just before it, and we're going to have all sorts of crossover potential, but also confliction potential. Where things don't agree, or where we're stepping on territory where we've already been. Where it's just like, we're going to jam as much time as we can in that 5-year rebellion area instead of branching out and doing something new. And obviously, we're not there yet. I just, having seen it once before, I worry that it could happen again.
Well, and that's also like The Mandalorian, you know, is 5 years after Endor.
Yep.
And so it's like, okay, so that'll be... you know, that gives us more time, and we'll start branching off from that, but that's already a little bit more removed, you know, so... anyway.
Well, but it's also for me, I look at that and it's like, yeah, it's removed, but it's also stepping into the era where the EU already, like, you had the Rebellion era and then the New Republic era, which was that 30-year period after. It's been covered pretty hard. And so, like, the more we just insert in between the movies, the more nervous I get that we're just going to fall into old patterns. And so... but, you know, we're not there yet. I will remain hopeful that maybe we'll. And again, obviously, I don't have to pick up any of this. So I got the movies. I'm on board with those for now. And, you know, hopefully we'll get some actual decent video games if we can get away from EA. So.
Yeah, no kidding. EA sucks. Just throwing that out one more time. Oh, well, thanks, Chris. That was a good little history lesson.
Yeah. Thank you. I enjoyed putting it together.
So. Be sure to follow us on Twitter. Let us know what you thought of this episode. And any others. Pay attention for next week's episode. I cannot tell you how good it's going to be. Oh my goodness.
Don't oversell it. No, it's going to be awesome.
I don't think I can oversell it at this point. It's so good. I'll be putting out some stuff on our social media, so be paying attention for that. That will be in connection with our episode. Speaking of interconnecting things.
Hey, speaking of significance and everything, is next week's going to have something to do with a certain holiday?
It will.
What?
Oh,
yay!
Oh, it's going to be so good. So yeah, follow us on Twitter @MoreCivilized. You can find out usually pretty good news about us there, and also you can talk to us there. Let us know what you're thinking. And then A More Civilized Podcast. There's all kinds of shenanigans going on in the Facebook group there, A More Civilized Podcast. So join in the fun.
Where you can see things like today or this week's awesome post.
Mm-hmm.
It's a comment again by our favorite Steven.
/ semi-official fact checker. He's rebuked me a few times on Facebook for errors we've made.
He has some comments, some follow-up from our last episode. Or the bracket episode. Was that the last one we did?
I think so.
Maybe.
Yes.
I lose track.
Me too.
Also, he posted those, I think, a week or two ago. A couple weeks ago.
No.
You said he posted.
What I'm about to read.
Yeah, you said he posted them this week, but by the time this airs, it will not be this week.
He posted them recently.
Yeah, it will have been a week. Anyway, whatever. So it's comments about our bracket. He says, by the way, Ahsoka versus Anakin, Ahsoka all the way, and Qui-Gon versus Holdo, Qui-Gon all the way. Which I think did that.
Yeah, it was Qui-Gon.
With us?
Yeah, you guys did win.
But also Ahsoka versus Anakin. Who did we?
We had
to
Anakin.
look at it.
Yeah. Did we have?
Yeah, it was Ahsoka.
Okay,
I'm pretty sure.
All we ever see Holdo do, other than the hyperspace ram, is withhold information in such a way that it leads to mutiny.
Yep. Attaboy, Steven.
I mean, there's
Don't let them
Also,
get you down.
devise a plan that will save everybody on that ship that gets screwed up by one of the other guys.
and there's never an excuse for mutiny.
yeah.
I mean,
Never?
never.
Well, never's a strong word. Okay. I'm chaotic enough. I'm more than willing
All
to
right,
justify
Ross is on a
mutiny.
U-boat in the 1940s in a German U-boat. Apparently, there's no.
No, he's
no
not
reason
because
for
he's a
mutiny.
paladin.
That's
Anyway.
right.
This is not an excuse for mutiny.
Okay, fair.
So,
Yes.
especially
Especially considering the fact that he royally effed everything up.
yep, yeah. Anyway,
But he looked
That's
good
kind of
doing
the
it.
point. And that's kind of the point of the whole thing is Poe thought he had reasons to mutiny, but he royally effed everything up because he shouldn't have mutinied. But nevertheless, you have people who do have the whole story going, no, he was perfectly justified in that. It's like, you can understand why he did it based off of the information he had, but he was patently, obviously not justified in doing that. Like, look at the end results. You can see for yourselves that that was a bad choice.
anyway, thanks, Stephen. Thank you for helping
Yeah.
with discussion. You can talk with me directly on Twitter at Mr_R*star.
You can, if you are in the Provo, Utah area, next week, I believe. Yep, next week. Starting next Thursday, the 14th, Valentine's Day, running through the 16th, Saturday. I will be at Life, the Universe, and Everything. I will be on a few panels there talking about video games and folklore. And I'd love to see you there. If you find me, snag me, we'll chat. And that is at the Marriott Hotel in downtown Provo. You can pay at the door to get in, so you don't necessarily have to register early. And early registration has already ended, so sorry, wouldn't be much cheaper anyway. But yeah, please come down and find me there. You can also, I have a story recently became available called Blackhand. It can be found in an anthology titled Put Your Shoulder to the Wheel, an anthology of Mormon steampunk, Volume 2. And I am in that, so please go pick that up and
Do it.
and
Give Chris your pennies.
Yes, I actually do. This one does pay me royalties based on sales, so please buy it all up and make
I did
me,
it. I bought
make me
mine
money.
already.
Yes, I appreciate
First
that.
day it
Thank
came
you.
out.
Yes,
Stand
sir.
it up, my friend.
I appreciated that. So yeah, you can find my story in there. You can go in there and pick that apart and say, well, gee, you're not doing any of the things you say are good storytelling. And I'll be like, yeah, I know. It's harder than it looks, okay? Or more likely, I'll probably say something offensive and make some gestures that are offensive. But more likely my response. But yeah, please pick that up. I'd love to have people read that. And that also will, those sales will go to a lot of other really great authors as well. So, and then you can find that on Amazon. And also, please let us know if there's anything you want us to cover.
It's like $4 on Amazon.
Yeah, the ebook is $3, I believe, $3 right now,
Yeah,
and there
something
will be
like
a
that.
paperback version coming out later if you want to wait a little bit and snag that. And so please, yeah, let us know if there's anything that you want us to cover in the podcast. We always love hearing new ideas for episodes and new things to discuss, because we're sure that eventually we're going to start having a hard time coming up with ideas someday.
It's not happened yet.
No,
It's not
yeah.
happening anytime soon.
Yeah, we still
But
have
it
a very
could
large list,
eventually.
but-
I mean, we've already planned out next year's Valentine's Day episodes.
We sure have, and boy, is it going to be good.
So we're planning for a long run. We're planning for the long run here. Let us know what you want us to talk about. We'd love to hear it.
Yep.
And again, may the force be with you.
Always.
I'm Anna Graves, and thank you for listening to a more civilized podcast.
Do
Chill.
anything.
Yeah.
Like, this man has not filed his taxes in 20 years because he can't ever find enough freaking time to do it. Luke Skywalker's Jedi Academy is as bad as Hogwarts. I mean, come on. That place is freaking dangerous. Go read the Junior Jedi.
Yeah,
Guide.
it's true.